Hello and welcome back to the Garden Freedom Training Series, the complimentary training series that gets you started growing vegetables wherever you are. My name is Stacy Murphy, known to many as Brooklyn's Backyard Farmer, and it's my goal to help millions of people enjoy the incredibly satisfying, delicious, money-saving, and nourishing activity of growing healthy food. And I've trained thousands of growers all around the world how to get the most out of their garden. That means more fresh-picked organic vegetables, even if all you have is 100 square feet of growing space and less than an hour a week. My passion is to remove any obstacles so that you can take part in one of the most nourishing activities on the planet. And whether you're thinking about planting your first seeds this season or you've been growing for multiple seasons, thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining a growing movement of people who choose homegrown food for a healthy home, a healthy body, and a healthy planet. You are the new homegrown revolution. And like I mentioned, this is the Garden Freedom Training Series. What does that mean? Well, the stakes are high because let's face it, if you don't have food security, then your everyday survival depends on big corporations that may be more interested in their profits than your health. Growing food, when you know how to do it right, like I'll be showing you in this video, can make you self-reliant and free. Today's topic is juicy. Think about how much you've spent on organic vegetables at the farmer's market or the grocery store. Now, you may have heard that growing your own food is like printing your own money. And yes, gardening can save you money at the grocery store if you know how to let the seeds, the sun, and the soil do all the work for you. You've probably noticed that seeds are inexpensive. You just have to know what to do with them. And if you stick with it, gardening provides cheaper produce the longer you practice. And yet I see so many beginners give up after just one or two tries and they never see a return on their investment. And I get it. It can be frustrating when you invest your time, energy, and your grocery money into learning how to garden and then you don't see any food as a result. So allow yourself some time to improve and be patient with yourself. Anything that you've mastered in this life has taken you multiple attempts, and gardening is no different. In this Garden Freedom Training Series, we've already talked about the 10 biggest mistakes that beginning growers make and how to avoid them. That was video number 1. In video number 2, we talked about the right place to grow those vegetables, even if you don't have a yard of your own. So in video 3, this video, we're going to be building on the lessons of video 1, where I talked about my system of growing. So I want you to make sure that you watch video 1 first, and when you're done, come on back here, and we'll be ready for you here. In this video, I've already been hinting at the next question you're probably asking yourself. Is it worth it for you to grow your own vegetables, and which crops are most worth growing? And I get it. It's not always about the money. For some people, the sheer joy of spending time outdoors with their loved ones, unwinding from a busy day, enjoying fresh-picked meals daily, knowing there are no toxins in your food, and connecting deeply with the rhythms of nature makes gardening the most nourishing and satisfying part of your week. You can't quantify that kind of joy and pleasure. It's to be experienced, and I want that for you. But let's face it, when it comes to gardening, there are also some practical considerations. Now, I come from a unique perspective. I'm a backyard farmer, which means that my business relies on me making wise investments that will pay off with armloads of produce. I have a system that I've honed over the years to analyze the value of growing vegetables. I want you to benefit from my lessons learned so you can spend your money wisely. Here's the thing I want you to remember. You can save money growing your own vegetables. It's all about having your own system in place. Listen, if you randomly put down some seeds and then just start throwing fertilizers at those plants and then trying a whole bunch of different techniques, what you're probably going to find is a whole lot of problems. You're going to find discolored leaves and pest and disease issues. Your plants might not fruit and other issues as well. And when you're chasing problems like that, it usually means that you don't have a system in place. It's a telltale sign. So what I want you to do is to take a step back and to look at your system holistically, because it's really expensive when you find yourself chasing those problems constantly. And when you look at the bigger picture, you can put in place a system that works for you. I have challenged myself to grow $400 worth of groceries in just 40 days, start to finish. That's with less than 100 square feet of growing space. That's what's possible when you have a system and you're able to make informed decisions about whether each crop is worth growing or not based on your garden. Why did I want to grow $400 worth of groceries in 40 days? Well, that's how much I was spending at the farmer's market on organic vegetables for myself and my housemates before I had my own garden. So I decided to challenge myself, and I think you'll be just as excited by the results as I am. In this video, my inner garden geek is so excited to crunch some numbers, and it's also my intention to show you that not only can data be fun, but it's also the secret to your garden success. So go ahead, download my template below this video, and let's get started. In the long run, growing your own food can be so much more economical than store-bought if you're growing the right plants in the right places in a way that fits into your busy day. And if you've been following along in these videos, you're familiar with one of my old backyard farms named Foxtrot, which is about 500 square feet of growing space. And on this site, I honed my system to harvest between 30 and 60 pounds of produce weekly. I tracked my expenses in depth each year so you can learn from my investment lessons. Now that I no longer live in Brooklyn, I take the same system and apply it wherever I am. So first, let's do a quick financial analysis of whether it's worth it or not to grow your own vegetables. So let's take tomatoes as an example. I've seen them anywhere from $2.50 to $7 per pound at the farmer's market, depending on your location and how ripe they are. So let's say you buy a packet of 40 seeds for $4.35. Let's say you plant them directly in the ground, which I don't recommend, by the way, but in this case, you're trying to save money and not invest in seed starting mix and trays. So let's say half of those seeds, 20 of them, become tomato plants that bear fruit. That's assuming you water and have decent soil. And you might yield as little as 2 pounds per plant or as much as 16 pounds per plant. This, of course, depends on a number of factors, including the tomato variety, plant spacing, your climate, and your experience. So let's take the middle road and assume you yield 8 pounds of tomatoes per plant. That's approximately 160 pounds of tomatoes total throughout the season. Now, if you were to take your original $4.35 to the store, how many tomatoes would you get? You'd get about 1.5 pounds. And that earlier image of the farmer's market, you'd get maybe one large-sized tomato. So compare that to your potential 160 pounds. Those 160 pounds are worth $400 at the store, and yours are ripened in the sun and fresh picked. So it does make financial sense to grow your own tomatoes, and yours might be more delicious than what's at the farmer's market or grocery store. So worst case scenario, you yield 2 pounds of tomatoes per plant. That's still 40 pounds total, which is still 20 to 30 times the amount you could buy with your original $4.35. So now you're probably thinking, what about the other costs of growing tomatoes? Yes, the design of your growing system matters. So depending on your local conditions, I've seen setup costs anywhere from 33 cents per square foot to $10 per square foot. And if you're internationally, you're going to have to do some research on your local costs. And at the lower end of that spectrum, the soil is in good shape with minimal amendments. And at the higher end of that spectrum, people are installing infrastructure like raised beds, greenhouses, higher tech growing systems like aquaponics. And I've seen rooftop setups from $16 a square foot to $100 per square foot. And in my longer class, we talk about designing the setup that works best for you. So let's assume you have 100 square feet and you're growing in soil. You build some planting beds and purchase all your supplies. You may spend $2 per square foot. So that's $200 for setup plus your time, and you can put your own value on your time. It may be $10 an hour, it may be more, whatever's right for you. Keep in mind your setup and time costs could be shared amidst all your crops, but let's just stick to one crop for now. So when you add this up, you haven't quite broken even. You may start to wonder if it's really worth it, right? But let's take a look at the second year. So your second year, you have less setup costs. You just need to replenish some supplies, and potentially your experience pays off with a higher yield. And now it's starting to make even more sense to grow some tomatoes, right? So lots of beginners give up after 1 year, after they've done most of the heavy lifting. It gets easier each year, and an investment really starts to pay off. So below this video is a template for a 100 square foot growing space, which would fit at least 42 tomatoes if you're counting, and if you wanted to grow nothing but tomatoes. I recommend you take this template, fill it out with your local prices to see how much your first year investments might be and how much money you might save growing your own tomatoes using these equations. So we've established there's a potential here for a large financial return growing tomatoes because a tomato plant bears multiple fruit. And of course, they're so delicious, freshly picked off the vine. Now, I want to show you how having a growing system can help you improve your yield year after year. This is some of my secret sauce that I always talk about. So once you have a system in place and you replicate it year to year, you can run experiments and you can increase your yield. So have you ever wondered what the relationship is between plant spacings and yield? These are the kind of questions that keep me up at night. So when you grow in a dense urban area, or if you're starting small, you try to pack in as many plants as possible, and that's where a lot of my data is coming from. So I ran a test growing Sun Gold tomato plants 12 inches apart and 18 inches apart. I noticed two things: a difference in the number of pounds of tomatoes per plant between those two spacings, and then I also noticed that the tomatoes required heavy pruning at 12 inches apart. But even though the yield numbers varied by plant, the total yield from a 72-inch row of plants was the same, even though there was more plants in one row than the other. So in the end, I decided I'd grow 18 inches apart so that I didn't have to waste my time pruning as much. Now, let's look at a similar experiment with early growers. Similarly, the yield varies by plant spacing, but this time it only requires a bit more pruning at the shorter 12-inch spacing. So I opt now for 12-inch spacing for early girls. I invest in a couple more plants at the start of the season than I do with the Sun Golds. I have a couple other varieties I like to grow as well, and I know exactly how many of each plant I need. And when you have a system and you know how many plants you need to feed you and your family, you can replicate it again and again, and you can run experiments to improve it year after year. And I talked about this in video 1. Growing food is a probability-driven game, and garden systems are the best way to quantify what works for you. Now, I mentioned my $400 and 40-day challenge earlier. Did I mention that I also used less than 100 square feet of growing space too? It was a really fun challenge. So there is a lot of vegetables and herbs that grow to full maturity in 40 days or less, especially if you can start from transplants. So I looked at my garden system and identified all the fast-maturing vegetables and herbs that could handle the cooler winter temperatures of San Diego or could be grown indoors. This meant a lot of greens, but that's okay because that's what I eat most of every day anyway. And I recommend setting your own challenge numbers and charting your progress. I bet you're going to surprise yourself how much you might grow. And when you have 90 days or more for a challenge, you can grow almost any vegetable as long as you choose your variety well. Now, not everything in gardening pays off, but the good news is with experience or with a good mentor, you learn how to make better choices. And I watch beginners try sometimes too hard to save money, to pinch pennies, and it doesn't always pay off. And this is where things get interesting, so you're going to want to pay attention. Which would you choose, a $4.35 pack with 40 tomato seeds or a 6-pack of tomato seedlings for $6? Which is the better deal? Keeping in mind, prices vary regionally, so you want to see what your local prices are. So because the potential for 40 plants for a fraction of the price of 6 plants seems greater, many beginners choose the seeds to try to save money, but potential tomatoes are not actual tomatoes. Here are just 2 things that can go wrong when inexperienced growers start their own seeds, making the seed starting process much more expensive than you might think. What if all the seedlings you grew look like the plant on the left here? As a beginning grower, you may not notice a difference between these 2 plants above the soil level. They look almost the same. The one on the left is a little smaller, has a couple brown leaves, but you might just chalk that up to the plant outgrowing its first leaves. And while the 2 plant roots look radically different here, you may not know what you're looking at as a new grower if all of your plants look like the one on the left and you have nothing to compare it to. Planting the one on the left will be a huge disappointment. After a couple of weeks, it will mysteriously wither and die, and you'll be left wondering if you should have watered it more or watered it less, because when things wither and die, it seems like a watering problem, right? On the right is a very healthy seedling, and on the left is a seedling that is suffering from damping off, which is a fungal disease. What really happened is that the seedling was grown in improper conditions and as a result got damping off disease. Damping off is essentially a sanitation or a moisture issue. You may have grown your seedlings in a plastic container that was used previously and hadn't been sterilized properly. This disease spreads through water and spreads from the tray to the plants. You may think that you've started your seeds correctly because they sprouted, but once you plant the seedling, it will die. You won't know why, and you're going to have to start all over, hopefully not in those same dirty trays again. And starting over is costly when you could have started with those healthy seedlings instead. And with the seedlings, you'd be at least 2 months ahead in the growing process by now. So here's another thing that goes wrong when inexperienced growers start from seed. Compare these 2 photos of basil seed sprouting. Look, the seedlings on the left are very leggy, appropriately named for the unusually tall and slender stems, while the seedlings on the right show what healthy basil sprouts look like. Leggy seedlings are the result of not enough light. Seedlings typically require a lot of direct light, more than the 6 to 8 hours that more mature plants need. Many newly sprouted seedlings want 16 hours of sunlight, which you can't easily get on a windowsill. I see people try to grow their own seedlings on the window ledges as a way to save money, but sometimes it just doesn't pay off, and here's why. If you try to plant these leggy seedlings, they might grow really well if you manage to plant them all the way up to the top of that neck so that those fragile stems are buried underground. But a lot of times when you try to do this, the stems break because they are so fragile. On top of the fragility in the transplanting process, those stems are the plant's circulatory system, moving water and nutrients, and that circulatory system is compromised. Look, how much harder do you think that plant is going to have to work to yield as much as the healthy plant that has a 2 to 3 times shorter distance to move water and nutrients? So the leggy plants are not ideal to plant. Yes, you can plant them and they might be fine, but you aren't starting with the healthiest plants possible. Think about it this way. Seedlings are babies. Trauma to a baby can have lasting effects on their long-term health. If your goal is to grow tons of food, then you want to start with the healthiest transplant possible. A seedling ready for transplant is the equivalent of a teenager. It's on the verge of becoming an adult, mature plant. So buying healthy seedlings is bypassing a lot of the work necessary to grow food. It's a shortcut and definitely worth taking for beginners. So I recommend that beginners find a trusted nursery or farmer's market to buy your seedlings, ask questions about their growing practices, find someone who knows where the plants came from and can answer questions, preferably someone who doesn't spray any non-organic materials on the plants. So find someone that you trust. And if you still want to grow your own seedlings, here are the investment costs to consider. Don't forget to budget your time, about 15 minutes a day for watering and checkups. You'll have to research your local material costs, and it's possible that the finances will show that it's more expensive for you to grow them yourself if you're growing in small batches. It makes sense in larger batches, which is why the nurseries can do this at a lower cost. What might make it even more expensive is if you fail to grow healthy seedlings yourself, and then you have to go to the nursery to buy them anyway. That's why I recommend the shortcut for beginners. Oftentimes, it's an easy win, and that's what we want as beginners. It helps us keep moving forward. Easy wins. There's nothing to feel guilty about or ashamed of that you're not growing everything from seed. You're free to take shortcuts to grow more food. Even as an experienced grower, I often choose seedlings when it saves me time and money. So which would you pick now, the seeds or the seedlings? And keep in mind that sometimes it is cheaper to start from seed for certain crops if you know what to do. And I go into depth on that subject in my longer training courses. Remember, if you're still interested in growing your transplants from seed, you need to know how to properly sterilize your seed growing operation so that you can grow the healthiest baby plants, because healthy baby plants typically produce a lot of food when they become adults. Another big mistake I see beginners make is wasting time and money growing the wrong plants. Remember, when I challenged myself to grow $400 in 40 days, I chose very specific crops that were going to mature very quickly. And there are checklists that you can use to pick the right crops for your specific case in your garden. So let's look at basil again. Basil is one of those plants that makes a lot of sense for me to grow. I eat a ton of it. It's expensive at the store or at the farmer's market. It's hard to find the varieties of basil I like even at the farmer's market. It grows like a weed anywhere, even in containers. I can harvest more every week, and it doesn't take up much space at all. That is a great equation for a money-saving crop. I haven't bought basil in years because I grow it year-round and I let it to continue to seed itself, so I don't even need to spend money on new seeds. On the other hand, there are some crops I personally prefer not to grow. Zucchini fits half of my criteria for a good crop to grow, but because it's susceptible to pests in my region and it's available and inexpensive, I choose to buy mine at the market. In the first video in this training series, we talked about planting the wrong things as a common mistake. So hopefully you can use this tool to evaluate crops according to your situation, and what might be the wrong crop for me to grow might be the right crop for you to grow. So if you answer these questions about each crop and compare them side by side, you can evaluate if you want to grow a crop or not based on your goals. For beginning growers, I would recommend prioritizing easy to cultivate and high yield, or plants that you can continue to harvest over the season. And the most important factor is to not waste your money growing something if it doesn't grow easily in your region. That's a really bad choice if you're a beginner. In the first video, we talked about the extreme case of trying to grow bananas in Brooklyn. You'd spend a lot of time and money, probably never see any fruit. If you're having a hard time filling in this checklist, ask an experienced grower in your region to help you for 15 minutes and identify your primary crops. In my longer courses, I go through checklists like this for all the common vegetable crops. And there's a template that allows you to compare all your crops side by side in the ebook that goes along with video 1. So don't forget to go back and download that. So hopefully after watching this video, you understand how creating a garden system can quantify your garden vegetables and help you decide what to grow. If you're truly committed to growing your own vegetables, and lots of them, there are some investment costs involved in setting up a garden. That's a given. And if it's truly important to you to pay off that investment quickly, it can be done if you have the right garden system. And sometimes it's not about the money, right? Of course, you might find that gardening is the most nourishing activity of your day and that all of the additional benefits are going to make it all so worthwhile. We're talking about improving your health, knowing exactly what you're eating while avoiding toxins and GMOs, not to mention the physical benefits of working outdoors and bonus points for doing something good for the planet. In today's hectic and overstressed world, one of the things so many people struggle with is feeling a bit disconnected from a sense of really belonging. And gardening is one of the most powerful ways I know to discover a sense of belonging you might never even know you are missing. In my experience, people who garden are also people who smile more, laugh more, love more, because you aren't just growing plants, you're also growing your own place in the world.
Now, I know I covered a lot of information and very quickly. Remember, I am a garden geek. I love crunching numbers. It's what I do. I crunch numbers so that you don't have to. And in the link below this video, there is a rough budget template. You can download that and apply that to your local conditions. I have students all over the world who use that document to assess whether or not investments make sense for their growing space each year. And it's awesome that you are here watching these videos with me, but at a certain point, you have to get out there and take some action, right? So if you want fresh, delicious, organic, homegrown vegetables, they're not going to grow themselves. So it's going to take some work on your part. You got to get out there and do the work. Some of it's going to be physical. And so if you're ready to dig into the earth and pull out your own sweet carrots, I'm going to be opening enrollment to my Grow Your Own Vegetables online 8-week course in just a couple days. I'll be opening enrollment in video number 4, and I would absolutely love it if you would join me there. And the way it works is similar to a workshop. We will open registration and we will enroll the next class. And in just a couple days, we'll have to close registration because the course is about to start. And so my next video is about finding the time you need to take action and to take the next steps towards your vision. And I'll have a lot of details about the upcoming course as well if you're ready to get started with that as well. So look for an email from me coming very soon. But in the meantime, I would love to hear more about your vision. So what steps are you taking today to ensure that this year's harvest is your best harvest ever? And of course, I would love it. Post that below. I would also love it if you give me a thumbs up if you like this video. We all like being liked, including me. But more importantly, post those comments. I've been reading your comments, responding, people from all over the world, and I love hearing from you. So please post, and I'll see you on the next video.